What's happening? It's AC, otherwise known as Drew, coming at you with an update from my basement in Minneapolis. Let's just address it. Things are a little bit quieter here than they were a couple weeks ago. As far as I know, none of our residents has been shot in the face in the last week or two, and we're pretty grateful for that. So, appreciate all the support, the people that have been checking in. I know a ton of people have been, going above and beyond to try and show some solidarity with us, and we really appreciate it, and hope that you don't all have to go through this as well. Crossing your fingers. So what do we have on the agenda today? I want to give you guys an update on the script that I talked about last time. I am unbelievably stoked about the progress that I've made since we talked last, and I'm going to show you I'm going to show you a handful of things. We're going to walk through the architecture of the script just a little bit. We're going to go actually play with it, and then I'm going to show you a couple of results. We're not done yet, but we're making good progress. I. So let's get into a little bit of the content. I'm going to blast through this really quickly because I don't assume that most of you care all that much. However, I think it's important to understand the mechanics of what's going on beyond just looking for crossovers and stuff like that. So where we're at right now, we got about a 6,500 line Pine script file. It is basically a full application at this point, and it is comprised of the engines or the components that you see called out on the screen here. So everything basically starts with the setup, but the context engine is the thing that generates the signals that the setups are looking at. So I started with that first. The context engine, it consumes, we'll talk about it a little bit more in the next string, but it consumes native signals and it assembles new ones that I find interesting or useful in order to put them together in different permutations in order to make these setups that I described earlier. Then there's the setup engine itself. This is really the nerve center of the whole works, and it is essentially the thing that aggregates all the information and then drives all of the decision to the other parts of the script. The structure engine, it is a part of the context engine, but it is independent enough that I call it its own engine. Its job is looking at the behavior of price and classifying those behaviors. That largely shows up as, pivot points, but also existing things like VWAP and, session open, things like that. We classify those, give them a weight, give them an importance, and then allow the price to behave from there. And we've got the event engine that is looking for things that occur as time plays out. So that would be things like a break of structure, an impulse candle, stuff like that. So we're looking for those when they happen. They are capable of triggering other decisions downstream. So they're important to the way that the engine works. Then we finally have, we have the policy engine, who's really just a global kill switch. Its job is to enable or disable trading, and we can allow it to do things like if there's a trade in place, if volatility is too low or too high, if it looks like it's unsafe, things like that. So ultimately everything's kind of aggregated through the policy engine. And then finally, the entry engine, and that is where all of the magic happens. I'm gonna have to do a series of videos on kind of the way that each of these works. If anybody's interested, I say that I'm going to have to. I will probably do one because I'm a nerd. And if you're interested in nerding with me, I will go into more detail on how all of these engines work. But in the meantime, I just wanted you to have a sense of what is the structure out there. Now, this crazy mess, it's not showing up as well. I hope your screen is big. This crazy mess is a description or a kind of a layout for how all of these components interact with each other. And it goes through, the content or the context engine and the primitive signals in the primitive signals, the things that we are able to get from the market, as well as the synthetic signals that I have put together as well, which is aggregating some of those things. It's sort of doing a little bit of signal alchemy in order to give me more useful or more reliable signals that I prefer to use. I will show you how that works out here in a little bit. The structure engine, what that is doing with those with the pivots that it detects. It goes through a promotion strategy. We get rid of invalid ones. We classify them. There's a whole lot going on there. We have the event detection engine, the execution engine, which is essentially in charge of taking entry and exits. Also, checking in with the policy to find out if we can take trades. And then the entry engine, probably should have done that in a different different order, right? The entry engine comes before the execution engine, but the entry engine is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the way that this script works, and I'll show you a little bit more about how that works. And then up here in the top, I've called out the setup lab. I essentially found that I needed a dedicated space where I could play around with signals without formally setting up a setup. And so the setup lab is essentially that. It is a collection of all of the signals. I'll show you guys what it looks like here in the lab here in just a moment. But it is a way for me to take all of these signals and drip and drop and mix around and swirl in an Erlenmeyer flask all of the things that I'm playing with to find out, hey, is there data to support that the correlation between these things might be of use? And that is what we are doing with that. So the setup lab touches all of the same components that the setups do. It is just informal and unstructured, whereas setups are very structured. And I'll show you how that works in just a minute. I just wanted to give you a live shot of me putting together the script. This is totally what it looks like. And this is also maybe not as legible as I went, but I wanted to also give kind of an indication of what does the workflow look like, right? I got all these things and they're all wired together. Ultimately, this is sort of the order that it goes through. So I grab a signal. Let's say I'm looking for trend or I'm looking for momentum. Then I want to take that and combine all the things that enrich that signal. Then I'm going to, in this setup, I say I need these specific things to be true. Once I have met all of those requirements, I then say, entry engine, find me the lowest possible risk entry. And then entry engine will execute. Once that happens, it goes off to the execution engine where the trade is placed. And then the trade management policy manages that trade for me. I am currently in the process. In fact, that's what I was doing right before starting the video, of going through and tweaking and basically rebuilding the policy management or the trade management policy engine right now. I'll show you a little bit of that here in practice as we move into the next part of the presentation. So right now we've got a live screen, as I've mentioned in the last video. I'm only trading NQ. This whole thing is built to work for NQ and NQ only. It will work on other things if you want to put the time in, you, me, whoever. If somebody ends up putting the time in to tweaking the signal so that it works with other instruments, that's fine. But this is built for the volatility and the whippiness and the way that NQ behaves. So everything is cambered on that because that is the only instrument I intend to trade with this script. So that being said, we're looking at a live window right now of the NQ, and we've got the 5-minute chart and the daily chart here just kind of overall. You can see I'm keeping the charts relatively clean. You'll notice the first thing you see here, I've just got this, this moving average here that really, it's just a moving average, right? We're above or below, it doesn't really matter. There's nothing magical about it, and I don't do anything with that moving average in this script. It is just there as a visual reference point. We've also got VWAP up here, and then you can see that there's a couple of lines here. Now, those lines are actually being plotted by the entry engine, or specifically, there's a component that lies between the structure engine and the entry engine called the LOI engine, or the levels of interest engine. That is the component that looks at everything that is within a 2 ATR windows period of the current price, and it classifies and gives a weight to each one of those items. That is exactly what you're seeing here on the screen. This is a real-time view. It repaints every bar. It grabs a new set of LOIs. It reclassifies them, paints them on the screen so that you have a visual cue as to what kind of structure is around here. These are the things that the entry engine is actually responding to in real time from proximity and weight in order to determine whether it's a good time to take an entry or not. So, as I mentioned, that is a key component of the way that this works. The setups look at the large structure. Let's maybe back up a minute. This whole thing is a downhill structure engine. So we are starting with a regime measurement, which just means a very large time frame. That's actually part of why I've got the daily up here. I'm looking at the 42 moving average on the daily. So it is a fairly slow moving, and I'm not looking directly at the moving average. I'm looking at the slope of the moving average. The distinction sounds minimal, but it is huge, I assure you. I use a lot of slopes in the way that this script works. I have moving averages. I don't use them directly. I am, however, very interested in the slope of VWAP and of moving averages. And so the regime measurement is the largest structure that I'm currently looking at in this inside of the script. And so essentially, on the daily, are we generally going up or generally going down, or are we flat, right? We're kind of approaching, you can see it right here, plain as day. We're approaching kind of a flat part, right? We've broken below. We're now, the structure is starting to make new lows, and we're getting close to previous lows of many days here. And you can see that the slope of the moving average is starting to flatten out a bit. That causes the script to behave differently. There are certain setups that only trigger when we see a relatively strong upwards or downwards momentum. Once we start to flatten out, it takes some of those setups off the table. That is critical to the way that the script becomes adaptive. And it works in the way that the market is capable of expressing itself. We want to take that information, make good decisions. So that back to the downhill concept. We're starting with the regime. We move down to what I call major structure and then minor structure. We've also got, there's trends, there are moving averages involved. I'm consuming a lot of raw signals, but all of that comes down to this point here where this very small window, right? This very little tiny bit of the price action here, the LOIs are painting the structure that the price entry engine is considering when it thinks about making an entry. All right, enough on that. So you can see that I've got my management window up here on the side, and I've added quite a bit since we talked last. I think when I did the previous video, I basically had one setup. I'd just gotten things working. I've now got, I think, 5 or 6, maybe more setups running, plus this new dedicated lab, right? Like, I have been busy. So let's take a look at, what's going on with some of these. So I've got different, they all have different names and they're all intended to do different things. So I've got, the trendy kick is intended to be a trend continuation play. So, if we enable that, and I've got a bunch of settings in here that govern the way that this setup actually works, right? It's pulling these different signals. I'm using different thresholds. I'm causing them to be meshed together in different ways. And what's going to happen here, because I'm in the strategy, is you can see that I'm instantly doing backlog, or I'm instantly doing a back test here back to October 19th of 2025, right? So as soon as I turn this thing on, it's going to go back through those 3 months of historical data and say, hey, had you used this setup, here's the sort of performance you'd have gotten. And in this case, we would have made almost $3,700 with a max drawdown of 1,000. So, pretty good, profit to risk ratio there. 139 total trades over the course of a couple of months, 61% success rate. So I was able to get a nice jump up in my success rate. And, or I think, I don't remember what the numbers were. I will tell you the profit factor is much better on this. And this isn't even the best setup. This is just the first one in here on the way down, right? So this is just one of them. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm starting to mess around a little bit with trade management, which means all of these are built. Everything that you see here right now, that performance that you see on the screen, that is based on a single mini NQ, not even one of the big ones, right? It's not even a micro. I'm sorry, a micro, not a mini. Not even one of the minis. This is a single micro NQ contract, one at a time. So this is not me taking 3 or 4 at a time, one contract at a time. I can only have one trade open at a time. That is the performance over the course of 3 months with this single contract. It's dope, right? Now, as I mentioned, I'm starting to play around with the trade management. Aside from that being a fairly impressive response from a single contract, that is also the trade performance when I use static stops and targets, right? There's nothing dynamic going on in there. When I start to make some adjustments into the trade management, right? I can maybe do adaptive trails, adaptive stops. I can set dynamic targets. The performance improves. So it is recalculating right now. We'll see in just a moment. All right, that knocked us up. By changing the trade management, I went up to $4,600, almost $4,700 on over 92 trades. Now my profitable trades dropped off, right? I was 60% before. I dropped to 46%. However, my profit factor jumped up to almost 2.2. So we made a bunch of extra money. We took less trades. We weren't as successful in them. However, the profit factor jumped up. And if you were paying attention to this max drawdown here, I cut it in half. Before, our max drawdown was $1,000, which, nobody wants to lose $1,000. I mean, it's easier if you're making $3,600. But in this case, I've actually cut my max drawdown to $500 while the total P&L went up an extra $1,000. So the ratio there jumped significantly. And again, this isn't even the best setup. Let's jump down to, this is the surgical strike setup. So I disabled the trendy kicks, moving down to surgical strike again. All the different signals, I'm combining different things, different thresholds, different ways of integrating them in order to produce these results. All right, great. So there it popped up. So the surgical strike. Now, the P&L is not as impressive as the last one. I will grant you that. But I will point out that the max drawdown for making that $1,400 is only $200, right? So at any point over the last 3 months, the most I drew down over all of these 88 trades was $200. And I was right 64% of the time with a profit factor of 2. Now, I'm going to admit to you that the thing I found out next was a total accident, but it is part of why I like working in the lab. I accidentally mistyped this number here, and I think I mentioned earlier, right? These are mostly working off of static stops, static target, static stop. The first one was a 3-3, right? 3 ATR stop, 3 ATR target. That was the initial thing. Once we moved over to the dynamic stops, you saw that we got the improvement. This particular setup just performs better with static stops. And I'm only doing a 1-and-1, right? 1 ATR stop, 1 ATR target. So it's very small, it's kind of scalpy, frankly, but it's very high precision, as you can see. And I accidentally typed in, I accidentally increased the stop one time and found out a very unexpected thing, right? So essentially, I didn't increase my target, I increased my stop. So I increased my risk. And by increasing my risk, I did increase the drawdown a little bit, but that jumped me up almost $1,000. So like a 30-40% increase in the P&L up to $2,200 over 84 trades that were profitable 83% of the time with a profit factor of 3. I don't think I'm going to get any better than that. I mean, like, I'm not going to stop trying, but like, that's banging. That is great. And if I can take those trades on a regular, consistent basis, I'm gonna be fine. So I've got a bunch of other setups in here. I'm not going to go through all of them today. We don't have the time. But I did want to show you what was going on, show you the progress in the script, let you guys know how excited I am about this. I haven't even gotten to the coolest part about what this thing is yet. I want to, I want to get a little bit further through here. I'm still doing some work and sanding off some rough edges here. But this is what's happening with the script. And before we go, I do want to bring you down here to the trade lab. I mentioned a little bit earlier. This is where I'm tinkering around basically in order to get these setups figured out, right? So I come down to the trade lab. I can enable it, and it lets me adjust all of the things I described before, right? The context engine, the structure engine, all of those things are available. I've got all these signals that I can take and I can tweak and combine in different ways to see if I can find signals that help each other out, right? Are there any things in here that result in 3 months of backtest data indicating to me that this might be worth a look? Now, I will warn you right now, and anybody who's done any of this type of work will say, maybe that's just overfitment. It could be, right? It's entirely possible. I have found through this extensive work within PineScript that there are some challenges with doing deeper backtesting. Namely, accurate right now trades only happen on dated contracts. So as it stands right now, I'm using the MNQH contract. That is what gives me the most up-to-date, real-time, this is what's happening. I can show you what trades I took today based on this behavior. But in order to do deeper backtesting, I can't use H because that contract just started, like weeks ago. In order to do deeper backtesting, you have to go to the continuous contracts. That changes the math. There's a whole thing. I'm not going to go into it, but the continuous contracts are synthetically stitched together, and it messes with the backtesting data like a lot in the current contract. less so over time. So part of the process here is taking this data and bouncing it around to different points in time, right? How would this trade have done in April of 2022? How would this trade have done in the middle of the pandemic dump? How would this trade have done the day that, Trump announced the tariffs, right? Like, you got to take these things around. So back to the overfitment. Is there some overfitment here? Probably some. And I've got some indication, right? And that's part of, I need to whittle and connect a little bit more in order to probably blunt the current results, in order to abate what would be otherwise pretty rocky trading days if I lean into a structure that's not going to support me the way that the current one is, right? That's just the nature of backtesting and the market itself. But consistently, right, I have been able to locate a bunch of these setups that are providing very consistent, profitable results with a very advantageous risk to reward ratio. That is the whole point. And what I love about it is I'm not in there making emotional decisions. The script sees an opportunity, it tells me, I can decide whether I want to take that trade or not. So that is really what this is meant to do, is increase my confidence when I see something and not take something ill-advised because I am emotionally triggered about something, about a loss that I just took, right? I know that's discipline stuff, and I'm just applying technology to my discipline problems. It's okay. This is how I'm dealing with it. So, but in the lab here, right, I can simply come in and start to adjust, how strong do I want the entry signal to be? Do I want to pull some elements from momentum? Do I want to pull some elements from, the trend confidence score or from the pivot structures? These are all available here in the lab. And so I can simply turn on things and find out, like, hey, if I turn on momentum value here, does it help or hurt? If and if it hurts, can I tweak the thresholds a little bit in order to get it to behave a little bit differently? So I just flipped on momentum value here. Now you got to give it a second because it's doing an unbelievable amount of math to tell you what happened. Oh shit, it looks like turning on momentum, this particular setup is not interested in having momentum participate in it, or at least not in its current configuration. So we're going to take that back off. Now you can see that this current shape is not bad. I mean, it's $1,600. Now when I look at the drawdown, right, I have to risk 600 to make 1,600. It's still like, look, that's still $1,000 of profit. It's $1,600 of profit. I just had to risk 600 of it to get there. But like, look, man, it could have gone the other way. So, and you can see that there are clearly points in here where the trade, this did not just straight make money. And I appreciate that, actually, that it's not just telling me that like everything I come up with is amazing and you'll totally make some money. It's not what this does. It tells me that some of my setups are shit. And I throw those setups out and I hold on to the ones that are working. And man, brother, I got data to support it, man. I got I'm doing all this backtesting data and keeping track of everything that I'm coming across. I'm testing the way that it goes in. I'm getting the signals. I'm moving things around. I'm looking to find out where data supports the outcomes I want. That is where I'm happiest in my nerdy little heart. Data supported decisions. And that is what this is bringing to me. So I will do another video here before too long. I will show you more of the setups. I will show you the crown jewel of the effort here when we connect next time. So I'm in the middle of validating it right now, and I just couldn't be more excited about it. But in the meantime, I'm pretty excited about what I showed you today as well. All right, gang, that's all I got for you today. I hope things are safe and good for y'all where you're at. And I don't know. I'll see you on the next one. Take care, gang. Peace.